We've had plenty of years of plenty for Anglo American, BHP Billiton, Rio Tinto and other global resources players. They've all been looking for the next big deal. This is Tonight. I'm Bruce Whitfield, and tonight we look at whether or not we've reached the end of the commodities boom. It's a big call to make. Joining me is Stanlib's mining analyst, Kobus, Nell, and Michael Kavanagh, who's the mining and metals analyst at Noah Capital Markets. Are we at the end of the super cycle? It's been, 15 years or something, Kobus?
Yeah, to be exact, 12 years. For the last 12 years, we've seen the Chinese fixed asset investment percentage of their GDP expanding from high 30% to close to 50%. And it's a remarkable run, and you look at a lot of the commodities, especially in iron ore, has been a clear standout for these diversified miners, the big money spinner. They've benefited from that, copper exposure as well, and other commodities of lesser extent. So yes, we've went through an exceptional period. I mean, you got to call this more than a super cycle almost if you compare it against previous industrialization patterns. And yeah, there is unfortunately more than not a hangover that's got to be dealt with, and I think that's what you're seeing now from the bigger diversified companies, what they're trying to do, deal with this hangover.
We're going to talk about that in just a second. Let's coin a new phrase. Let's call it the Uber cycle, the resources Uber cycle. Are we at the end?
Well, I tend to agree with Kobus. I think we certainly have probably rolled over, and we are somewhere near the end of it. And we go through a period now of consolidation, a period of, let's say, restructuring. And we start the makings of the next cycle, but we've certainly got to deal with the fallout as the cycle has rolled over.
I mean, it's early days yet, but BHP Billiton doing the big reveal today as to dividing the company into two: certain assets and listed entities in Australia, other assets elsewhere. Make sense of it for me, please. You guys will do it a lot quicker than I will.
Yeah, I guess if you put it in context, there's some numbers of around $12 billion. For this Newco company that's been or that's expected to be spun out or demerged in the first half of 2015. And
what will be in Newco?
So mainly it's your aluminium exposure, it is your South African coal exposure, it is your manganese exposure from South Africa, and then a little bit of nickel. And then a little bit of silver, lead, zinc, some of the others. But in the bigger context, percentage-wise, it's probably about maybe less than 10% of the market cap as it stands today.
So why are they doing this, Michael? Why are they taking this, say, 10% of the value of BHP Billiton and putting it into this thing called Newco? Because this looks like the rats and mice bits of the operation.
Well, in the context of this commodity cycle rolling over, and you think about new CEOs that have taken over at the diversified mining companies, each one wants to make his mark, and in some way or form or other has to create value for shareholders. He's under constant pressure to do so. Now, if you're not getting help from the commodities or from the commodity prices, then you have to look at other options and other ways of creating value. And certainly by spinning off some of the less appreciated assets, if you like, you can distill a value for those assets and potentially create some value. And then focusing on productivity gains, efficiencies at your flagship assets, at the ones which are favored, you can probably extract a little bit more value out of those. So, I would think at the end of the day, it's management trying to make their mark and to deliver value for shareholders.
Is Newco all the South African bits? Are all the South African bits of BHP Billiton now housed in Newco? Or is there anything that is South African not in Newco for BHP Billiton?
There's still Richards Bay Minerals, which is not in the Newco.
So this isn't oh my goodness me, let's distance ourselves from South Africa play.
It's not necessarily a anti-South Africa move,
not
if you like.
necessarily. That's a useful, that's an interesting word.
It's not necessarily. Look, I think at the end of the day, they look at the assets which are generating returns, which are generating cash flows. And unfortunately, and that's a whole discussion on itself as to why the South African assets are not performing. The South African assets are not performing. And, maybe it should be a wake-up to the South African authorities as well.
Well, South African authorities may very well see it as an opportunity to maybe take a stake in Newco at some point in the future. One looks at Anglo American. One looks at Mark Gidifani taking Anglo American Platinum and saying, it's on the market, guys. Come, bring your bids. This is a trend that is going across certainly the globally diversified miners, Kobus.
Yeah, and certainly in Anglo American's perspective, it's a little bit bigger. There's probably about $8 billion of assets that could come under the hammer out of the 37 billion market cap roughly speaking. So you talk about a 20% a cut from Anglo American's perspective relative to a 10% on a BHP Billiton perspective. But certainly I think in Anglo American the differences in some of the assets are more extreme, so to speak, and certainly, you know, a hurdle rate has been set. I think Marco Defani really want to show investors that they can be disciplined, that they can actually manage quality opposed to quantity going forward. You know, it rolls easy off the lips, and it's a nice thing to say when you are in tougher times. But you know, you also got to appreciate a lot of these assets that are looking to spin off now are well below. If you look at the last year or two's profit contribution and margins is probably 40, if not more % less than maybe a 10-year average, you know, that we've sort of seen. So yes, you know, is this a question where a lot of these companies are going out and throwing optionality out and almost selling call options on these assets? You know, that's the question one got to ask. And is this maybe a way where they're preparing themselves? They made peace with the world. The commodity boom is over in the way we've sort of known it, and they got to reposition themselves, and that means there's not enough space for everyone on the bus. And let's be honest, Bruce, you know, the diversified mining, global diversified mining companies have done heavy lifting over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
More than $600 billion have been invested.
$600 billion
has been invested in the commodity space. You know, and it's all chasing, I guess, that return, that extra bit they can actually put on the table for the shareholders.
But it is ironic, isn't it, how they all expand at the same time and all then show signs of contracting at the same time as well. Is this just simply part of a trend? What drives it, Michael?
Well, at the end of the day, it's driven by the commodity cycle, and you know,
by demand.
By the demand, but the demand for shareholders' returns. At the end of the day, as we said earlier, the companies have to work out how they're going to deliver returns to shareholders. When the commodity prices are rising and things are booming, then the executives come under pressure to grow, and they go and make acquisitions and they build new projects.
As we saw with Anglo American going mad on iron ore in Latin America, and Marco Defani then unwinding that position as he comes in and the new Bream comes in to sweep clean. It's a tough job up top, isn't it?
So it's typical cyclical behavior, and then don't forget that the advisors and the investment bankers also need to make their money. So
of course, somebody's got to support them.
You know, they'll always be spinning a story which is appropriate to the economic cycle.
Absolutely right. When we consider the fact that, I mean, Maurice Klop is a BHP Billiton was trying to buy anything that wasn't nailed down. Potash in, was it Canada, and various bits and pieces. There were 3 big deals, I think, that escaped his clutches. BHP Billiton executives now must be grateful that those didn't happen.
Yeah, one would think so. I think the classic faux pas, if you like, is Rio Tinto with the aluminium business.
I mean, remind us what happened there?
Well, they bought at a very high price, right at the peak of the cycle. They bought, was it Alcoa or Alcan? Alcan they bought, and you know, now the current management is stuck with it and had to work out what to do with it.
That's glorious. I mean, we watch these cycles come and go. This time it's going to be different, though, or not? Because when we look at the South African environment, it's a tough space. And Neil Friendman's been on the show and he's spoken about the fact that it's at a price. I mean, he's keen to buy some platinum assets. He'll go for it. It does create opportunities in the market, doesn't it? I mean, these companies that are divesting, they're consolidating, brings new players and maybe a new bit of excitement into the market.
Look, sometimes it works. You know, more focus. You know, as simple as that, just more focus and better execution, doing the basic stuff right, you know, adds a lot of value. I think sometimes what you do see in these big conglomerates and diversified mining houses is that, you know, there can be a lot lost for shareholders, which sort of moves under the radar screen, and it's not really hitting the main headlines for the company, and it's kind of ignored or sort of let it go on its way. And when you actually bring it out in a much smaller format, in a much more focused format, you know, there can be value generated.
We say this at the end of the cycle, and it's ironic, isn't it? Because at the beginning of a cycle, you're going, go and buy something, go grow, go make yourself bigger, go on, you want to be a big gorilla. And then these guys end up juggling 15 balls at once, and they're going to drop a couple.
No, and that's the thing. I think as you move through the cycle, and as the cycle expands, you know, it's almost like the price actually, as I said, forgives a lot of things, and it kind of disguises a lot of the problems. And I think you only kind of getting aware of those when it's really, when it's really turning on you.
But that's it. I mean, the returns are coming under pressure, so executive teams are trying to manage the balance sheet better, and they're consolidating. Whoop-de-doo, and everybody goes back to the drawing board, and we start the cycle all over again. What happens if the super or the uber cycle isn't over? Where if China's just cooling and continues to grow? These guys are going to look a little bit silly in 2 or 3 years' time, Michael. Or is that being a little bit too hopeful for continued
I'm not
Chinese?
sure if silly is the right word. I think under new management, if the new co-assets in that scenario will probably perform quite well. Okay. And so they will turn around and say, look at the value that we unlocked.
We're talking about BHP Billiton in this particular one, yes.
So they'll turn around and say, look at the value that was unlocked by giving those assets a dedicated set of management and balance sheet, etc., etc. And of course, the good assets, if you like, or the popular assets, let's call them, those will perform even better. So everybody wins in a rising tide, if you like.
Absolutely. Our executives, I mean, I remember talking to Tony Treyer probably 12 years ago now. It's like, oh no, the super cycle is over. That was 12 years ago. Nobody had anticipated the boom in China. And people misread that then, and they could be misreading it now.
Yes, it's true. It's fair to say that forecasters get things wrong both on the up and the downside.
Absolutely. And
quite possibly, they might be misreading the signs. But from where we sit at the moment, the global economy is not in super great shape. We're probably going into a sustained period of lower growth, and under that situation, with the supply side response that we've had to higher commodity prices in preceding years, on balance of probability, let's say the commodities and commodity cycle probably be a bit softer.
Yeah. What does it then do to the global resources complex, Kobus? What does it look like for, I don't know, call it next 5, maybe 7 years? What does the world of big mining look like? Smaller, I guess.
Look, but one got to remember the base of demand is extremely high still. So as long as we still see China
6-7%
growing with a 0.5% multiple of steel demand on your normal GDP, which leaves steel demand about 3.5-4%. Things are ticking along, and the iron ore price is sort of hopping along, and we have seen sort of 2 years where we've seen a lot of supply coming to the market from BHP Billiton, Rio, some of the big miners. Now, that is coming to an end in the next 2 or so years. So if you're going to see this, this trend of growth continuing, and we are seeing a lot of the capital investment getting pulled back now, then, like Michael said earlier, it can actually set up a new cycle again, which commodity prices normally go through.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. It's effectively a big resources spring clean. That was Stanlib's mining analyst, Kobus, Nell, and Michael Kavanagh, the metals and mining analyst at Noah Capital Markets. Thank you for watching. There'll be more tonight, tomorrow. Until then, good night and goodbye.